In today's episode, we have Marcus Bullock, CEO of Flikshop. He took what he learned in prison.
I was also gaining a new set of skills as a result of the emotional intelligence that you must build inside of an environment like that. I had to learn how to become a chameleon inside of different environments and different conversations.
And used it to build a leading app to connect families with loved ones in prison, allowing your letter and photo to be uploaded and sent to the prison in just a click of a button.
They can upload a photo into the actual the Flikshop mobile app. They can type a quick message. And what Flikshop does is we take that photo and we take that message and we print it on a real tangible postcard for them for 99 cents.
Learn how he turned the worst mistake of his life into a catalyst for a life he had never dreamed of. But first, be sure to like this video, leave us a comment, and hit subscribe for more content like this.
Man, I have been really eager to speak with you. This is one of the coolest, most inspirational stories I've seen in some time, so I appreciate you being with us, Marcus.
I'm glad to be here.
So diving right in, 15 years old, what happened to you, man? Your life changed pretty big.
Yeah, man. So, born and raised here in the Washington, D.C. area. A friend of mine and I, when I was 15 years old, sophomore in high school, right before the winter break and about a week after my 15th birthday, we went to a shopping mall here right outside of DC in Virginia, where we committed a carjacking. We tapped on a man's window with a firearm, asked him to get out of his car. We hopped in the car, drove off, left him there in the parking lot. That decision landed me in front of a judge, with me getting arrested literally the very next day, where my judge sentenced me to 8 years in adult maximum security prisons. Nah. So I didn't have a record before that. Right before I had gotten, I had a unauthorized use of a vehicle that was a week before that charge. And that was as a result of me driving around in my own stolen car that I had gotten called for. And then the next week, we committed carjacking.
Your own stolen car.
There was some about those car. Yeah, man. I stole a car. Yes, I stole a car. So the interesting thing about the neighborhood where I grew up in, right? Like you could find any kind of way to angle yourself around to get what you wanted.
Right.
I didn't grow up in one of the best neighborhoods in the Washington D.C. and even in Prince George's County areas, but I ended up learning really quickly that I could learn how to get one of those cars, like one of the guys who hung out in the corners, if I could find out where a neighborhood chop shop was. So I found out what a neighborhood chop shop was, stole a car, and I had my own car that was chopped up in like my name or something. It was crazy times back in the 90s.
So one of the things that kind of threw me a little bit about your story, or I read all about it. I watched your TED Talk, which is inspiring. We're going to talk about that. But what was the reasoning for you being charged as an adult? Because, again, you're 15. The legal age typically is 18 unless there's extenuating circumstances. And you didn't go to a juvenile facility. You were 15. You were sentenced to 8 years. And you went right to an adult prison. Is that right?
Yeah, it was an instant time. It was the 90s. In the 90s, that was during the era that in every political landscape, no matter what side of the party you were on, people wanted to lock you up and throw away the key. And if you came, especially if you look like me, you came from one of the neighborhoods that I came from, and if you happen to be a teenager, it was around the start. Like the big start of it was highlighted in by the Central Park Five, the exonerated five. Now that these guys who were children went to court, they got touted as these aggressive criminals that were doing this egregious kinds of sort of acts in every political figure. I mean, all the way down to Hillary Clinton, who got on TV and said that these young men that are coming to our neighborhoods and terrorizing, including people like me who stole a car, they're super predators. These are super predators, and they have to be stopped. And we got to figure out a way to be able to stop it. And so laws were sweeping around the country that put prosecutors and judges in their seats and put all of us kids in their hands. And they started giving us tons and tons of years for
Yeah,
crimes
but
that,
adult is that's harsh stuff, man. And usually
yeah,
that is
yeah.
reserved for. So did the judge bring up any extenuating circumstances? I know you've never denied that you did it.
No, 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 absolutely.
So was there? Did you guys beat the victim? And I'm not saying what you did was right by any means. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it.
No doubt.
But I mean, what was extenuating, or what was the reasoning behind sending a 15-year-old to an adult prison? Because statistically, the chances for abuse of that 15-year-old, prison rape, violence, becoming gang affiliated, if you haven't already been, it's almost certainly likelier to happen when you take a 15-year-old and put them around 30-year, 40-year-old lifelong career murderers and rapists and career criminals. So it seems like a pretty extreme step for a 15-year-old.
I mean, well, not only was it, certifying a 15-year-old as an adult and sending them to adult prisons, but the way that my judge sentenced me, that they sent me to adult maximum security prisons. And so, yeah, I mean, I was a teenager. I mean, I spent my 16th birthday, 17th birthday, 18th, 19th, 20, 21st, 22nd, 23rd birthdays, all growing up inside of some of the state of Virginia's worst prisons. Now, the reality of it is that, along with those sweeping laws around sending kids with all this time, a big part of it was the kind of charges that they were attaching to them. They were layered with either mandatory minimums, or which would include, put you inside of a classification that will strip any empathy or flexibility from the judge at all, and say, hey, listen, no matter what, we have to give him, because of these laws, we have to give him, not only we have guaranteed, we got to give him adult time. And because he has adult time and it was a violent charge, he has to go into a maximum security prison. And as a result of him having to go to maximum security prison and having, been doing it in adult time, we have to follow the sentencing guidelines as well. And those sentencing guidelines landed me with a sentence that was really 23 years to life. They really sentenced me to 23 years to life. But they suspended 15 of those years and left me with 8 to actually serve.
Yeah.
And then I had to do 10 years of probation, saying, hey, look, after those 8 years that you serve, you have 10 more years. If you catch a jaywalking charge, you're going to have to go back and do those 15 years that we suspended for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, over my life and my career in journalism, before we got into this world that we're in now, I've been to adult prison facilities doing news stories. I've been to maximum security prisons. I've been on death row twice, interviewing inmates that were condemned to die. One in Reno, Nevada, an individual who he actually was executed. He died in Reno's gas chamber. He committed the murder as a juvenile under the age of 18. And I did an interview in Florida State Prison in Stark, Florida, outside of Tallahassee, in the same death row where Ted Bundy had been executed. That individual, named Jesse James Livingston Jr., ultimately had his sentence commuted to life, and 35 years later, he's still in prison. But having seen those conditions, having walked through those prisons myself, maximum security, and I had a team of prison guards around me. Everybody else was in a cell, in a cage, so arguably I was as protected as humanly possible, and I'm not going to lie, I was pretty scared. This was real stuff. What was it like on your end? You're on the inside. You're not the one being protected by the guards. You're not the kid doing a news story who gets to leave after his interview. Take me back to day one, that first days and weeks when you're 15, 16, and you're waking up in maximum security. You're walking down the tier to cell block, and people must have been looking at you like fresh fish.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I knew that. I mean, I grew up in some of the neighborhoods where a lot of the men that lived in those prisons, where they ended up, right? Like, I didn't have a fear of that, to be honest. Like, I would walk outside, and I saw, a dead body behind the bushes when I was, a 12-year-old kid, and that's what I grew up around. So being inside of an environment where all of the people that were on the housing unit and on the tiers, like those being the 30 and 40, 50-year-old men that have 40, 50, 60, 70 years, to be honest, that wasn't even really a fear of mine. The fear of, like, when I first walked in to prison, I was in complete denial. Like my brain hadn't even matured enough to understand the real legal ramifications of what had actually happened.
Yeah, I read somewhere that you actually thought that you were going to be going home. That for the first year that you said in an interview that you were kind of
Two.
delusional. Yeah, 2 years. So you're delusional and kept thinking your mom's going to come pick you up, or you're going to be home for your birthday. You're going to be home for Christmas. Like it didn't really set in.
Yeah, no, it didn't. Like when I was a sophomore in high school. You know what I was thinking about? Even while I was in the jail cell, I was like, yeah, look, y'all in here, not me, right? I got into my first fight at the at Fairfax County Jail over some cookies because the dude thought I stole his cookies and pulled up on me and asked me like, yo, you stole my cookies? Literally, I punched him right in the face 2 times. Bop, bop, and then we started fighting. And then, eventually, you know what I mean? Like somebody ended up breaking up. He was bloody. I wasn't. And they took me to the hole, and I sat in the hole for a week or so. They let me out, and then they like that wasn't that part of me. Was like, look, this is just what it is. This is the environment you're in. This is what it is, right? But even through that, I'm like, I hope they hurry and let me out the hole so that I can go ahead and go back to Sula High School, because I got to I got to catch my earth science class. The reality of it is, if I miss too many math classes, it's going to drop my GPA so low, and I'm gonna start in shooting guard for my basketball team. There's no way I'm gonna be able to start. The coach ain't gonna let me start if they don't let me out, so I can hurry up and catch my math classes. That was where my brain was.
Yeah, you couldn't even
After
comprehend at that age.
Yeah,
You
that wasn't even
really
my
couldn't.
world.
The weight of what had sunk in. I mean, that's fascinating and heartbreaking. But the reality of that, you're in the hole, meaning solitary confinement by yourself. Pretty much, it's a 24-hour, 23-hour lockdown minus a shower.
24 hour.
24
hour. You get into a shower. Segregation is 23 and 1. Isolation is 24. Segregation is 23 and 1. You get the 1 hour out your cell inside of 4 walls with kind of sort of no roof. That's like 25 feet high.
And that's some pretty grown-up stuff. But then in your mind, in your 15-year-old mind, I mean, you're functioning like a grown man. You're in prison fights. You're big time. It's the big house. It's maximum security. You've been through us. But in your 15-year-old brain, which is as far as it's developed, you're like, man, I'm missing math class. I'm missing science class. Oh, if I miss basketball practice, I'm not going to get to play in the playoffs. And it's not sinking in that you got 8 years of playoffs that ain't going to happen for you. Man, how did you finally come to terms that you're not going to be home for Christmas or the next Christmas or the next one or the next one or the next one? What was it that when did you wake up and be like, man, this is real. I'm here for a bit.
Yeah. I was about 2 years in when one of my boys that was in with me, my boy Danny B, he was around his mid-50s. Because we're in prison, it's one of the only places you can be like 17 and one of your best friends is like in the mid-50s. But he and I, we walking around the prison rec yard, and I'm like, yo, so look, very wise, really, really smart, you know what I mean? Like real cool guy. I was the playful kid on the rec yard, and everyone was like, yo, my man, you got to chill, stop joking. You always want to play. I wanted to bounce off the walls. I just wanted to go. My physiological body couldn't calm itself to be restrictive enough inside of an environment that wasn't conducive to the person I wanted to like joke and play and have fun. And I was energetic and I wanted to read. I wanted to learn. I needed to soak information in and regurgitate it back out. Like my brain was trained to do that way. I wanted to play ball. I wanted to run laps around the track because I run 40, 50 laps, you know what I mean? Just from basketball practice. So my body was conditioned to want to do these things. And this quiet man was really reserved. I found it so fascinating that he just walked with calmness and he was chill and he was so wise. And he always, whenever he spoke, everyone in the rec yard listened, everyone in the housing unit listened. And so he became really cool. I just jailed toward that. And one day I asked him, like, Danny B, how long have you been here? He told me he had, at that time, already served 31 years. And that's when my heart sank, because I knew that if they would keep a man for 31 years, my hopes and dreams of getting out by Christmas or the first day of school or before prom or any of those things were completely obliterated. I knew I would have to do the remaining 6 after having doing those first 2.
Your story, which becomes so inspirational, and one of the main reason we're talking today, and we're about to get into it, but even up until now, from the point where you were arrested, before you were arrested, you went to jail and beyond, there was an angel in your life, in your story, that is a continuing thread that has a lot to do with why you ended up on the other side of life where you could have been. And that was obviously your mom. How was your mom through all of this, from when you first got arrested, seeing her son go to jail? When would she come visit you right away? What was this like for her? And how did your guys' relationship shift, or what was it like while you were in prison?
You know, my mom was incredible. One of the things that I learned very, very quickly inside of that space is that you cannot stop a mother's love, no matter what you do or where you come from or the journey that you take. At least you couldn't stop mine. My mom, my mom was one of the people that were inside of my life that would not allow me to be able to veer down a path that I was like uncontrollably heading down, especially when I realized that I had to serve all 8 of those years in prison. When she saw the depression and the hopelessness, and I tried to push her away because I didn't want her to be subject to the shakedowns, pat downs, the underbra, you know, filling up, like all of that stuff, like it was challenging for me to have to go through it, have to squat and cough every time I walk in and out of a location where it could be a secure environment. But it's another thing to subject to my mom to this, right? I'm the one who decided to steal that man's car, and it broke my heart to know that I was putting her through that. But she wouldn't let
They
me
often
push her
say
away.
that you know, when you go to jail, your family goes to jail, or everyone's and as you said, you stole the car, you were involved, you've never argued that, but what really sunk in for you is now it's not just you being strip searched. Your mom comes to visit you, and she's being treated the same way a prisoner might be, and that just crushed you, right?
Like having to see that, knowing that, knowing she would come through and just feeling, so like just broken down by just the process of getting into the visiting room. There was some shame that was baked inside of that the moment that I walked in those doors, or knowing that I, was the cause of her having to move out of her, 3-bedroom apartment into a studio efficiency because she demanded that I call her every single day, and the phone calls there were $18 for 15 minutes. And so I'm like, dang, like you have to choose between where you live or if you're going to pay a $750 a month phone bill. Like
Yeah.
that was crushing.
So that's a big part of Flikshop, right there. Let's talk about that, because I think most people are absolutely oblivious to the the price gouging that happens in situations of prisons and phone calls. You just touched on it. What year was this again that you were in prison starting?
I got arrested in December of 96.
Okay, and so 96, 97, in the late 90s, which is a long time ago, right? You're saying that a 15-minute phone call for you to make was about $18 for you to call your mom?
About $18 for 15 minutes. The
Wow.
call started off at like $7.50 or something like that, for just to connect the call, and then it was like $1.50 or something like that a minute or something.
And how does this work? Like your mom had to give a credit card, or your mom had to prepay? Like you, obviously, you're not walking around prison with cash on you. So does she set up an account, a family member?
Yeah, so on the prison phone system, you can add the telephone numbers that you want to be able to call to get approved by the prison facility. Once the prison facility reaches out to that person on their phone and identifies that that's who they are, and they say, all right, well, you know what? You are confirming that you're okay with, Marcus Bullock calling your home at this telephone number, and you're willing to accept the charges each time you press 0. You're cool with that. Once my mom confirms, they say, all right, cool, Marcus, and you can now call this telephone number. And every time I call that telephone number, it's just like a regular collect call back in the day when you would just pick up the telephone number. I would type in my inmate number, type in 01 area code telephone number, and it will call my mom, and will register back to my inmate number. And then my mom will receive that telephone bill every month.
And what people need to realize, and most don't, is that wasn't, back then, it wasn't AT&T or it wasn't MCI. Those were and still are private telecom companies that work through the prison. They're for profit, and they're doing a lot of different things. Now, their argument may be that, one, they're recording the calls. arguably for safety, potential evidence. They're making sure that nothing inappropriate or illegal is being discussed, but it's not a typical phone line, typical company. But the companies that are setting those up and running them back then and still today are private, and they're for profit. And the issue, which really you experienced firsthand, but millions of inmates are dealing with today, is it's kind of extortion level pricing. You know, you go back 20 plus years ago, and it was $18 for 15 minutes. I don't know anyone that would pay that today. Imagine what that was 20 something years ago. And clearly the majority of inmates are not coming there from hedge funds from Bel Air. They're families that are living at or below the poverty line to begin with. So man, that was kind of another blow to you, realizing that every time you call your mom, it's a fortune. But your mom, what? Your mom said, call me once a week, once a month, or how did that work? Because I know it added up quickly.
Every day.
Your mom said, call me every day?
You know what I mean? Like I was a kid. Like I was like, you know, like I was a dude in prison with an MA number. I was still a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old teenager, right? Like the 15, 16, 17-year-olds that live in our homes right now, our children, we go crazy if they don't call us before midnight and let us know where they are. And if they come home one night later, like they don't come home that night, you will lose your mind wondering where your teenager is, right? My mom was losing her mind wondering what was going on with her teenager, even though she knew where I was. She knew that I was in an environment that any news channel, any movie, any television show that was reporting about prison will tell you that your child, your son, your only son should not be surviving right now in this moment. And she weighed, and that had to weigh on her every single night, literally 365 times, 8 years straight.
Did you know that every call you made was that expensive? Because I know you said that your mom went from
I was still also 15, 16 years old. So I don't know if I had the understanding of what, like I had never paid a phone bill before. So she could have told me how much it was, right? She could have told me it cost $7,000. And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
right. You didn't have a concept.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't even know what that means. You know
but in
mean?
reality, you're saying it was like roughly $700 a month.
It was like $750 a month every month. Yeah.
Wow. And your mom, in doing that, you're saying your mom was living in a 3-bedroom apartment. She downsized to a 1-bedroom or a studio to pay less rent so that she can afford to speak to you every day on the phone for 15 minutes.
Yes.
And did she ever show stress, or was that something that she let you?
I didn't even know it. That's something I found out years after I came home.
Wow.
Like that's not even like, it wasn't even a part of the conversation. It was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, what did you expect me to have? How did you expect me to have to also pay that rent there, but also pay that phone bill? Like, what was the expectation? Like, you telling me now, Marcus, that this was a bad idea. You didn't want me to do this, but in your world, like there was a finite amount of money that came into the house every 2 weeks. And we could literally afford to do very little when you were still here. Yeah. Now you go away and you're probably more of an expense from having to, not one, accept your phone calls. 2, I'm sending you money for your commissary. 3, I'm coming to visit you. It takes me 3 hours to drive one way to sit with you for 30 minutes and to drive 3 to 4 hours back home and have to soak in my mind what's going on while I'm driving away from you. And I can't take you with me. Like, what was I supposed to do in this situation, Marcus?
So the other guys in prison, were they making phone calls every day? Were they getting that type of attention? I know your mom was writing you letters every day. She really was kind of there with you, other than being locked in the cell. I mean, she did this sentence literally with you. How did this affect the other inmates that you saw that did have some type of family support, and the ones who really didn't have phone calls or mail or visitors? Was there a difference in their mental capacity? Was there any impact you saw over who would maybe inclined to get out, better behavior, worse behavior, who got into more trouble? What did you see in terms of family impact on an inmate?
Yeah, and then do me a favor. Let's try to re-give the humanity to the folks that's there. And let's, instead of using the word inmate, let's say the people that are in prison or the people that are there, incarcerated folks, just so folks, that they're probably they have an opportunity to begin to help restore humanity to those folks so they don't have the label of inmate for the rest of their lives based off of the one decision that they made. But what I will say to answer your question though, like the folks that were there, like my friends, these were my friends, right? Like these were my brothers that they grew to be my best friends after all of those years. You know what I mean? They had an opportunity to be able to see and learn about my family in the visiting room or through my mom's letters and all that kind of stuff. And so while some had the opportunity to be able to call home or receive mail or get visits like I did, that wasn't the majority. The majority of people, like, I mean, this, right? Like you out of sight, out of mind, you know what I mean? And it's not that, the folks, your family members hate you or they completely repudiate you or like condemn you for life for this decision that you make. Some of that happens, but for the most part, it really is just Monday turns into Tuesday, Tuesday turns into 3 weeks from now, 3 weeks turns into 5 years. And next thing you know, I got a cousin that's locked up and they haven't spoken to them in forever. And so, the people that had that 10, 15 year, 20-year sentence, yeah, they definitely didn't have a lot of the family members who had the convenience to be able to stay connected with them and it didn't cost a bear.
Yeah, well, what's the thing in your case is that, look, statistically speaking, the chances of someone going to an adult prison at the age of 15, serving a long stretch like you did of 8 years, typically don't walk out of prison after 8 years and start what you did with Flikshop. So,
I'm blessed.
And how much of that is the communication of family, in that was, did it ever in your mind where there were opportunities, and I'm sure there were plentiful of good decisions versus bad decisions. There's gang affiliations. There's obviously tons of illegal activities that happen in prisons. Were you ever weighing out in your mind, I want to do this, or I'm not afraid to do this, but I spoke to my mom, like I'm hearing her voice in my head. This woman's driving all this way. Like, what impact did that strong connection with your mom, with your family play, do you think, in A, keeping you out of trouble in jail, and B, making you a success when you did get out of jail, versus statistically, I believe it's close to a 70% recidivism rate. You would know better than I what the latest number is, but when I looked it up, it was close to 70% are back very quickly.
Yeah, it is 76%. 76% of the people that are coming home are going right back. That's hard. It's such a hard number. And that number is like
revolving door.
The first three. It's literally a revolving door. I mean, but what I don't want to do, though, if I'm being honest, I don't want to paint the picture that I was like the perfect person in prison. Let me tell you something. When I got after that 2-year mark, when Danny B and I had that conversation, I became super dark and very angry and hopeless. Like I got into fights all of the time. I stayed going to solitary confinement. There were times when my mom would drive to come and visit me, and she couldn't even visit me, and there was no one to tell her that until she got there. And they were like, "You can't visit your son because he's in a hole." And she's like, "What does he mean he's in a hole?" And like, "Yeah, he's in a hole. He's gonna be there for the next 2 weeks. So yeah, you can come back in a few weeks if he gets his visits restored." And she would literally have to drive 4 hours back, right? Because I couldn't call and let her know that I was in a hole. Because I was like, I took that news tough. That was a tough time, being an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, realizing that I'm probably going to die in prison. Like my best friend had life plus 43, and he would talk often about the possibility of him dying looking at a cinder block wall. Like there was no difference between he and I in that world for me, because we lived in the same cell and we were both there guaranteed for the next 5 years. So who knew what would happen within the next 5 years? I wouldn't have promised that I was going to, make it out of there. And so that was a tough time for me back then. So what I just don't want to say is like, I just want to offer that up to people, like the amount of grace that now I've learned to be able to give to other folks, because I'm like, it took me a long time to realize, even during that prison sentence, that I needed to figure out a way to leverage all of the skill sets that I had just naturally had, just as a communicator and storyteller and a visionary, right? Salesman, all of those things, those were skill sets that I naturally had. But then I was also gaining a new set of skills as a result of the emotional intelligence that you must build inside of an environment like that, especially as a teenager, where you got to keep your head on a swivel. I had to learn how to become a chameleon inside of different environments and different conversations. I had to learn what not to hear or what not to see inside of those environments. I had to learn how to feel for others and feel with others. Because if you see a dude walking down a prison, down a hallway, he just burst out crying, like, don't even see that. Or should you see that and say something, right? You had to learn how to have that level of discernment as a 17-year-old. And all of those skill sets transferred over to this time that I have now, which now, interestingly enough, has become parts of my silver lining in that dark cloud back then.
So when did the idea of Flikshop first pop into your mind?
You know, it was interesting when, like, I came home in 2004 and the world had completely changed. I went in 2096, it was like no internet. I came home, it was Google. It was like I was mind blown by all the technological advancements, like the way that people communicated, the way the clothes that people wore, like all of that had completely changed, right? It was like an entire era just left. And so when I had tried to figure out how to navigate back through how to communicate in these environments, how to apply for employment, like I was trying to look for a job. I was 23 years old after serving almost 8 years in prison. That's almost a decade, right? So I can't even really explain what I've been for almost the last decade of my life. My last grade completed is the 9th grade, and here I am trying to apply for the same jobs in a bustling Washington D.C., competing against some of the world's best talent, that's looking for jobs as well. Having to check that box that said, have you been convicted of a felon, literally was like the biggest slap in my face. Because it was like people would literally look at me and be like, dude, you knew daggone well when you walked in this door that we weren't going to give you a job. Did you know you had a carjacking on your record? Yeah, right. You thought you was going to get a job here, right? And so having to learn how to navigate through that alone in and of itself, after thinking that serving 8 years, all of your problems are behind you, and now you have this new fresh start, that was a tough one for me. So then, we landed on a job application that said, have you been convicted of a felony, comma, within the last 7 years? Now, after just serving an 8-year prison sentence, I could say with complete and total honesty, no, I have not been convicted of a felony within the last 7 years. How dare you even ask me? The audacity. Who? Moi? No, absolutely not. I will be convicted of a felony within the last 7 years. And so that was at a paint store who gave me my first shot. And it was interesting because that was the thing that changed my life, that at least gave me my step up to get ready for what would later become the new entrepreneur Marcus.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So you had some persistence, a lot of persistence, tenacity. Were you tempted to give up? Were you tempted to go back to the streets? I mean, the fact that being told no, I mean, man, that's got to weigh on you in ways that most people can't relate to, because to your point, someone gets turned down for a job, it's not because they have no job history or have to walk in and say, I'm a convicted felon. But you had all that. Was there a time where you thought to yourself, the system's stacked against me, maybe I'll just hustle or go back on the streets? Or did you stay positive? Was your mom, your angel in your ear, keeping you?
You know what? To be honest, I didn't. I mean, there were times where some of my old fam. I mean, I still go around some of my old neighborhoods even today and go dap up some of my fellas, right? But there were times when they would be like, dude, you've been gone for a minute, and you stood tall. We know that you trained to not snitch. I mean, you could have snitched on some folks and got a sentence reduction. Like, so we will literally give you whatever you want to get back on your feet.
Right.
I'm like, nah, man, I'm good, bro. Like, I'm straight, because the reality of it is that I heard Jay-Z. What's crazy? Jay-Z was like a mentor from afar for me. He probably, one day when I'll meet him, I'll get a chance to definitely be telling this. But Jay-Z said, I heard him say in a bar one time, I could make 40 off a brick, but one rhyme could beat that. When I heard that one bar in my cell through my headphones, I almost lost my mind, because I was like, yo, this was the first time that I heard someone who was clearly very, very smart, because he was extremely articulate and his wordplay was different than a lot of rappers. And then he talked about how he talked about the streets and the drug game, which I was very familiar with, obviously, right? And I knew that the people who aspirationally I could try to be like, in order to be able to become my only word of what I saw, because you can't be what you can't see. So what I saw to the path of either a millionaire, being either an athlete or an actor, right? Like I saw that the drug dealer was like the out. So in Jay-Z clearly articulated his rhymes that he knew that the drug dealer was perceptively the out. But later on in his lyrics, he said, I could make 40 off of a brick, but one rhyme could beat that. And it showed me that there was other ways that people like us, I was a part of like a tribe now. There were people like us that could do something different with our, with our entrepreneurship, our entrepreneur desires. He was showing he was doing it with rap. Now, I didn't know what I was going to be as an entrepreneur when I came home, but I knew that I was smart enough to figure out how to have that same mentality. I could make 40 off a brick, but one fill in the blank could beat that. And what is that fill in the blank thing? And for me, like that opportunity, the paint store that I saw when I got it at the paint store, I saw my first shot at it, right? I saw my first shot at making more money from this game than I did with people in the streets. And so when the customers will come into the paint store and they would ask me, Marcus, how much does it cost to paint my kitchen? And then on this, 5 customers behind them in that paint line, after I'm mixing up paint and telling the customer, look, Miss Johnson, we don't paint kitchens. We sell you this paint so you can paint your own kitchen. The other painters will come through the paint line and they're like, man, this is a recession getting ready to come. It's like 2005 or, they're like, oh, we're getting ready to lose our job. No one's going to be. I'm like, well, you tripping. Miss Johnson would just, you know what? A light bulb went off in my head and I was like, yeah, I could make 40 off a brick, but painting the house, painting the McDonald's, could beat that. And I did. We started a small painting business where I was the conduit between those painters in the paint store and then Miss Johnson's, who would come in almost every day asking someone in the paint store to come and paint a living room or their shutters or the back porch. And I was first in line, like, you know what, Miss Johnson, come on, I can help you out. I got you. Let me have your number. When I get off work, I'll make sure I can connect one of my painters over to your project. I'll charge Ms. Johnson $250. I tell the painter, look, I noticed a $250 job, but I need you to do it at a discount for me for $200. Program my number in your phone as money bags, because we ain't friends. If I call you, this is literally money coming down your pipeline. And I'm the plug because I know all of Ms. Johnson's. So just do this job for me for $200. Ms. Johnson's gonna pay me $250. Everybody gets up happy. I promise you, I will keep your line flooded. You ain't never got to worry about work. So that was my job for a while before I was able to take this new experience, a new life that I was living. We built it up into something incredible. Next thing I knew, I was bidding on projects and winning them at places like the BWI Airport, National Press Club, Georgetown University. And now I'm like building this incredible business that's growing. And now instead of me going from the person that's seeking employment, I'm hiring people. And in the interview, check this out, the interview, I will commonly be like, oh, wait a minute. So you don't have a felony? So majority of people who work here have felonies, right? I don't know if you will feel comfortable. I don't know if this is the environment for you or not. I just don't know. I don't know if you're going to get the humor. People going to talk about commissary. I don't know. You know what I mean? And like it was like almost like a thing for us to be able to give back to the community in an incredible way.
I was gonna say, how did that make you feel when you really looked around one day and you took a look at your guys and some gals too, I'm guessing, men and women.
Yeah.
And you said, and you realized that now you weren't just employing yourself, but you were giving this chance, this opportunity to a bunch of Marcuses that really didn't have that open path. What was that like for you?
It was interesting because I don't even know if I honestly saw it until I hired my now wife. Back then was still my girlfriend, but my girlfriend, her sister had gotten into some problems, and she ended up after coming home from out of Rikers jail. She wanted to move from out of New York. My wife's from New York. She moved down here to Maryland, and I'm like, look, let's come and you come work with me. Help me organize the business because I love selling. I'm like door to door. And she helped me to help build up this clientele base and continue to structure the company in such an incredible way. I'm like, I can't believe that this is level of talent people are locking out just strictly because they caught a charge. This is crazy, but I'm benefiting from it, so I love it, right? And she was the one that pointed out to me. She's like, yo, Marcus, this has been actually like, you got to be working around all these people, and all of us got felonies. Talking about we walking up in some of the National Press Club, hoping that we're not going to get kicked out because none of us get a security clearance. And I'm like, oh, snap, it's crazy, you know what I mean, that we're building this incredible business that, is becoming a DC favorite, all strictly knowing that there was immense levels of talent.
How big did it get? How many people roughly did you have working? And like, what percentage-ish did you have in either turnover or people you had to let go for, whatever issues might have been.
Yeah. I mean, it was a high turnover. That's a high turnover business, right? At the height of our business, I think we had one of our largest jobs was at the BWI airport, and we had like 18 people, and 11 of us all had felony convictions. In fact, the interesting thing about that project was that we had to go into secure areas inside of the airport to be able to go paint, and I had to literally hire people that didn't have a felony conviction just to be escorts, because one person can escort up to 2 people on a badge inside of, behind the TSA areas.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, look, your job is just to not have a felony. As long as you ain't got a felony, you good, and you just escort the people, right? The real people that's actually doing amazing work behind the scenes. Yeah. So I mean, that was like, but it's a high turnover business, right? And a lot of people were contractors, right? Like these were contractors who, came in and out of the journey. They were, but fell in and out of other businesses.
But it wasn't turnover for behavior, for issues other than maybe moving on to another job. So it was a successful program for you.
No, I mean, because the reality of it, like we had a culture in the company where we understood, like, one, we could trust each other. Like, I can trust you in a rec yard, right? I can trust you in a rec yard. I can trust you with my company. This is an easy one, right? And you know what to do and what not to do. Like, people that have been in the prison, first of all, no, they don't. People that have been in prison don't want to mess it up. You know what I mean? They're like, look, I got a shot. I don't want to mess up any opportunity that I have right now, because it's highly unlikely. I say that all the time, even now. It's so highly unlikely that you and I are having this conversation today, right? And so when we get those opportunities, like, dude, we do it with I and so many others that look like me have done, right? Is that they take the opportunity, they seize it, and they treat it as their babies, and it comes out, it works out wonderfully for all of the parties that's involved. And that doesn't go, of course there's some bad apples in every bunch, right? Like even some of the people who are from some of the best colleges and universities that lie on their resumes and tell me they can overpromise and underdeliver when they talk about they know how to do data science. You lying. No, you don't. You're not
some of the biggest scoundrels and villains I've ever come across in my life, personally and professionally, did not have felonies, but they were awful people who cheated, lied, stole, but they didn't have a technical felony. I mean, we have elected politicians at some very high levels who do some pretty awful things. So so how did you go from the paint business very successfully? How did you get Flikshop going? Because that's the insane story that is just so beautiful.
Interestingly enough about Flikshop, it really was an accident. Like, we were, with the painting business was going well. We grew into a full construction firm. We were doing design builds. Like, I was the guy who wanted to come in your home and sell you a $50,000 kitchen remodel, right? Like, that was my life. I could tell you the best Brazilian granite in the entire state. I know where it came from, and I even know some of the volcano names it came off of in countries like in Brazil. When we were learning, when I was learning about all of this amazing new business, RFP terms and ITB and RFQ, and I'm traveling the world and I'm having these incredible experiences, my boys, the same ones I grew up in those sales with, like I told you, they were like my brothers back then. And they calling me and they like, yo, bro, this is crazy. Yo, like, yo, I can't believe that they let your crazy behind at the National Press Club where the presidents are, and they got you painting that. Yo, this is bananas. You got to send me pictures. And I would promise them, because everybody knows, especially if you've been to prison, like, how important pictures and mail is. And so I'm like, yo, no, for real, no doubt. As soon as I get home, I'm gonna write you a letter, man. I'm gonna take some pictures, man. I'm gonna send them to you. You know what I mean? Drop in the envelope. I'm gonna go to get some stamps, and I got you. And then, like I said before, right? Monday turns into Tuesday. Tuesday turns into 3 weeks. 3 weeks turns into 6 months. And next thing you know, I'm looking at my phone whenever they calling me collect, and I'm like, oh man, I forgot to send those pictures.
I never sent pictures. I never
send the pictures. You know what I mean? And that's how it happens, right? It's like I'm accepting the call, like, yo, look, I know I'm supposed to send you the pictures. My bad. And they're like, where you at now? I'm like, yeah, right now, I'm in LA right now, man. So the family, we all 20 of us rented a house in Redondo Beach, but it's beautiful. And I'm telling you, I'm gonna see the pictures of it. It's incredible. I know I'm gonna send you Christmas pictures too, but I'm gonna send you those too. And next thing you know, the cycle kept continuing, and I felt horrible. I really literally felt horrible. And I'm like, and I told him, like, if I could text you then my life would be so much easier. I promise you, bro. All my pictures live on Facebook and Instagram. Like if you
But they don't got cell phones walking around
you
maximum
don't got a
security
cell
prison.
phone.
Right,
Exactly,
right.
right. You know what I mean? Like you don't have there's no internet, there's no anything. All you get is snail mail. And so when I looked and tried to find some kind of technology that allowed me to be able to connect back to my friends in that interesting
Where
way.
you can pick up your phone and just be like, these pictures, boom, and get to your friends in prison, but it didn't exist.
It didn't exist. I searched the app stores for it. I looked at tried to find websites for it, and they were all either janky or they just seemingly weren't smooth enough for me to be able to get and be able to do it smoothly from my phone quickly, and do it affordably. And I'm like, how do I do that? And when I couldn't find a solution for it, I'm like, you know what? I'm sitting in the office, in between projects, in between proposals, and I Google how to build a mobile app. And it takes me down this rabbit hole, where I'm learning, I'm reading about all these different phrases that I have no idea. And this is back in 2011, 2012, right? Where third-party apps were still very, very brand new. And like only the big boys had apps. So the development companies, which I later learned were called development companies, right? Like I'm like the people who build apps, I would call them and I would say, hey, look, I want to build a mobile app. And they're like, well, who are you? What company are you calling from? And I'm like, I'm Marcus, and I want to build an app to connect me and my boys back from prison. They're like, what? Why would you want to talk to somebody in prison? I'm like, well, you know what? Clearly you are the developer for me. Hang up, call another one, right? And then I remember Googling who built Newsweek's mobile app. And I was fascinated by these new terms that this website was advertising. And they like this other developer who built cars.com's mobile app. And I would call all of these developers. They were extremely expensive. Like they would say all types of crazy numbers to develop this technology that I wanted to build that would later become Flikshop. But one of the actual designers who worked for one of these firms, they were considering leaving and starting venturing off into their own consulting firm. He gave me a call back a couple of months later, say, hey, I remember you were pitching this app idea. Have you started working on it yet? I'm like, man, I gave up on that thing. That John was like, that was called way too expensive. I'm remodeling these kitchens. Where you live? You want a kitchen remodel? I can come and I can make your basement super sexy. We got a sale right now on saltwater fish tanks. I got you, right? And he's like, nah, look, I would love to talk to you about this idea because I thought it was fascinating. And I'm like, all right, cool, let's talk about it. And he came down to my office one day, and I started by asking some type of crazy questions like, what are the personas and avatars and your UX design? I'm like, dude, I don't know nothing you talk about. He's like, well, let me use your whiteboard right here, and I'm gonna chart out how I think that we should go about trying to figure out how to build this app, and let's make it happen. I sat in that office, and that was the day that I was like, you know what? Let's do it. I want to make this happen.
And why did he do this? What was his?
I think he was really fascinated by my passion, because at the time I wasn't actively telling people that I had a felony, right? Like that wasn't the last thing. Like I'm saying it now openly. Like it was only an internal joke thing for the people who really, really knew me. The last thing I needed you to find out from me, as I'm sliding across a proposal of $50,000 across your kitchen table, is that the person you about to sign is just came out of prison a couple years ago. No, you gonna be like, boy,
and you're dressing nicer. You had money, you had a car, so it's like it didn't, you'd kind of.
I wasn't adamant. I was intentional about going to go buy I had to get the Louis loafers. I had the 650 BMW drop top. When I pulled up, I looked like a professional that you wanted to do business before I even walked in the door. Right, I understood how to be able to design like the brochures and the proposal. It wouldn't be a triplicate rip off of me doing some measurements. No, it was going to be a very thoughtful piece of 8.5 by 11 that's on a PDF that I'm going to email you right from the. This is when I had a BlackBerry. I didn't even have an iPhone. I had a BlackBerry, emailing proposals in the moment in the person's house. They're looking at me. They're looking at this proposal. They're like, you know what? I like this. This looks like it's going to have a great experience. Yeah. And so when he came in and he wanted to try to help with building the app, he was fascinated by how much I knew and understood about this industry and how I understood some of the underworkings behind why we had to have pictures right here, or what kind of posters we had to have, or what kind of perforation strip we needed to have, or the direct dimensions of the postcard. It needed to be this way. Right. He was like, your level of precision is incredible, or how you know the mail restriction guidelines for these prisons is
Yeah, so
amazing.
what content would and would not be permitted? It's going into a
Exactly.
prison. It's not, you know.
I had 8 years of market research. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I
But
knew it better than anyone else.
you were a student of human behavior. So you got Flikshop together, you tested it. What happens?
We were like, you know, we're going to build this thing. We're going to launch it. You know what I mean? I was really excited about it. I dumped a ton of money into it. I invested all of my cash in it, banked out everything, burnt out all of my credit cards to get it out there. And on launch day, the apps wouldn't launch and the website was crashing. And I think within that first 6 months, we sent 4 postcards.
In the first 6 months.
First 6 months.
I think the Pony Express. I think the Pony Express would have been quicker back a couple hundred years ago.
It was crazy.
Wow.
It was such a massive, massive failure. And here's the thing about that instant failure, right? It was like, in my world, it was like, it was a failure, but I was able to send postcards to my boys. And although these were the most expensive postcards I've ever sent in my life, right? But I'm able to send postcards to my boys, and it was cool, and they were loving it. And eventually, a couple of people at the facility where he was, they started to catch on, and then they would get transferred to a different facility, and they started to catch on. And then wardens were calling us, and they were like, I'm on projects, I'm on job sites, literally pick up the phone, like, hello, let me move it to another room. And this is a warden from someone. So I'm like, you know what? I'm on the plane. I'll be out there next week to come and meet with you, right? Literally, I will book a flight.
The reason that you did 4 postcards in 6 months was because there wasn't a demand. Nobody knew about it. It wasn't
Nobody
technical.
knew about it.
So it was like, how do you market to people in prison? Like,
no question. Yeah, it was like nobody knew about it. The people that did know about it, the technology was always breaking, right? There was no automation to it. Right. It was so horrible at that time. It was basically like, just basically upload your photos into this app, right? And the app worked and captured all this information, but it didn't formulate a postcard. It would just shoot all of this gibberish back to me. I would literally have to create a postcard using Apple Pages and PDFing that, and like creating this PDF and shipping it to this massive
very manual one at a time.
Very manual process to build these things. I'm like stamping them in my office at 2:00 in the morning to make sure they go to the post office the next day, because I'm promising that they're going to be shipped in 24 hours.
So how long till you got it dialed in where it's just like, you know, it's flowing, it's automated, it's Flikshop?
It took about 3 years. I had no idea what I was doing. It was horrible. Like I was running the construction company in tandem. This wasn't, you know, really my business. You know what I mean? Like, this was something I wanted to be able to make it affordable for all families to stay in contact with their loved ones. The prison phone industries was $1 billion industry. They've been price gouging forever. This was my shot to be able to kind of sort of take that space and own it and figure out how to be able to demonstrably cut the expenses for some of these family members, while also giving them a tool that they could use that would mirror what they would use every day, like an Instagram or Facebook. When we figured out that was the case, that we knew we wanted something.
So word gets out, you start to get contracts, deals with various prisons and institutions. So now I can go online, I can take my phone, send my picture, and basically it digitally sends it to the prison, and then they print it and can bring it right to the person who's incarcerated. Is that basically on the other end of it what's happening? Because obviously the people who are in prison don't have cell phone devices, but the prison itself then is getting this data coming in from your app, and they can just print it and hand it out really quickly. Is that how it works?
Well, we wanted to be able to take the pressure and the burden off of the prisons themselves, but also making sure that it was secure for them, so it wouldn't be an issue when they seen all of these postcards starting to fly through their mailroom. So what we did was we built our iteration of the mobile app that allows for our users to be able to register a free account. And once they register their free account, they can upload a photo into the actual the Flikshop mobile app. They can type a quick message. And what Flikshop does is we take that photo and we take that message and we print it on a real tangible postcard for them for 99 cents.
Boom.
Put their address on the back of it, put some posters on the top corner, throw it in the mail for you in first class mail, and then it goes directly to their cell in about 3 to 5 business days. It allowed for the prisons to not have to have the issue of whether or not someone was trying to smuggle something into their prisons, while also giving them the flexibility of saying, hey, you know what, this is a vetted business that we know is going to be able to help our families get on the path back to reentry.
Yeah, so it's like when people are going online each year, people can relate to when they're ordering their holiday cards from all these different companies. They're going online, uploading their photos, putting their message, putting in their address list. They don't ever have to touch it, but boom, it gets done like that. And it's really the same thing, only you're servicing a community, a population that nobody really had any interest or desire or understanding of how to service.
Absolutely. And I'm proud of that. I mean, that's to date. I mean, we've connected over 170,000 families all around the globe that are shipping these, small micro pieces of love into over 2,700 facilities in all 50 states around the country. Right. I mean, we talk about almost 650,000 postcards that we've shipped to date that have gone into these sales. And when I think about what that means, not only for the business that we're continuing to grow and learn how to be able to build, but what I think it means to the family members and what it signals to the world to say that there really is love that's hiding behind these fences. And if we're very thoughtful about how we inject this level of care and empathy into our communities, then that same 600,000 people that are coming home every year, knowing that 76% of them are going back to prison, then we can trickle that number back down, which contributes to our mission, which is to reduce recidivism by 50%, down to 50% over the next 5 years.
And is it a flat rate, 99 cents, or is there like a bulk pricing, or how does that work?
So each postcard is 99. Each postcard is one Flikshop credit. Now you can purchase one Flikshop credit for 99 cents. You can purchase 10 Flikshop credits for 89 cents each, which is a $8.90 purchase. Or you can purchase 20 Flikshop credits for $15.80, which is 79 cents each. So the more you purchase, the cheaper the credits become. But each postcard is one credit.
So it's a for-profit business, but that's a wonderful thing, because at the same point, you win if the business is successful. The people who are incarcerated win, their families win. Ideally, recidivism goes down, society wins. So it's a really cool concept that there really are no losers in this model. Nobody needs to get the short end of the stick.
Exactly. And here's the great thing about it. If we do our jobs right, we can continue to even make Flikshop completely free for the majority of our customers. One of the things I'm most excited about is us in launching the Flikshop Angels program that came as a result of a partnership with John Legend, an organization called New Profit, and Bank of America, that allowed us to be able to build out a piece of our technology that gives us the opportunity now to open it up to the community, so that the community members who want to become a Flikshop Angel, they can purchase Flikshop credits for children with incarcerated parents, so that they can Flikshop completely for free. We don't have to worry about them going to go ask auntie or uncle for their credit card for a 99-cent purchase, just to be able to send mom and dad a few of those cute, fun-faced selfies, right? We want them to continue to stay in connection with them. And so we also work with other strategic partners that allow us to continuously give Flikshop credits away to our families, so that we can continue to make this kind of technology available and completely democratize communication.
And how many employees is Flikshop now?
So now we're up to 11. We're up to a
Nice.
team of 11.
Nice. And, one of the topics I wanted to make sure we hit on is, because I referenced it, you used the word as well, price gouging for phone calls, communications, for, literally when you have people in prison, it is a captive audience that they certainly can't price shop. They can't do competitive research and say, I'm not going to use that phone provider, I'm not going to use this mail provider. Yeah. So it really is almost a hostage situation, where your choice is to either have communication with your family and really be price gouged, or don't communicate. Not a really good option. One of the more high profile cases was the owner of the Detroit Pistons, Tom Gores. I'm sure you're familiar with that case, and he owned a private equity firm that also owned Securus. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but Securus. Mm-hmm. And Securus was a telecom company. It's a telecom company that huge involvement in prison telecommunications, very big margins, and really the owner of the Detroit Pistons was outright being accused of price gouging himself. Very wealthy guy, billionaire, owns an NBA franchise. And there were very passionate calls for him to have to sell the Detroit Pistons because of his involvement directly in being an owner in a telecom company that was price gouging, taking advantage of people who are incarcerated. Since then, he's done some what appear to be admirable things of giving a lot of credits, free calls. He recently made some statements saying that, in his opinion, he actually thinks that these telecom prison phone companies should be run by nonprofits, not by companies for profit. And that might take away, or would in many ways take away the need for companies to try to hit a bottom line, charge more money, what have you. What is your take on that whole situation? I know you're familiar with it, of Tom Gores, and what do you think about that he's still the NBA owner? Should he have had to step down, in your opinion? Is what he's doing, the steps he's taking, is he putting his money where his mouth is? You're certainly the most qualified person to speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. I mean, we live in a state of cancel culture, and I get it, right? Like, we find these things and we find these elements and we get mad at people and we're like, yo, kick rocks, right? The thing of it is, I think that, he has a responsibility now to figure out ways to be able to, how to be more thoughtful about how to run his businesses. And the reality of it is, the majority of people that own these PE companies, like, they don't even know their companies. Like, they don't even know their investments, and they don't even know, especially don't know down to like how these investments generate revenue or how they are perceived inside of the marketplace, right? Now, unfortunately, they probably should, but once you get to a point, of certain levels of wealth, you just don't, you know what I mean? And so once he became educated, I think that he did have responsibility to be able to come out public and say, hey, look, this is what I've now been educated about. And it's his responsibility to self-educate. It's not our responsibility to educate him, right? You know what? I own this. My name is signed on it. I've been reaping the benefits of it. Let me self-educate and let me figure out how to be able to leverage all of what I know, my access, my social capital, in order to be able to figure out ways to be able to overcome some of these barriers that I'm learning that we're creating for some of our families that have been in these more desperate positions for several years, right? Now, with that being said, I mean, I think that, do I think that he's like, that he should have sold the team? I mean, he should have like stepped down, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't own a basketball team, right? Like, I think if I owned a basketball team, I'd be in a better position to say whether or not, you know what I mean? Like, he could or not. I'm still struggling to figure out why those kinds of companies or those kind of owners don't invest in people that look like me, right? If you wanted to be able to figure out ways to be able to make it more of an equitable place, or eliminate some of the inequalities that you see inside of some of the market spaces that you're dealing in, you're working in, you're investing in, the solution is not to be able to figure out ways how to peel back and say, let me figure out how, because a nonprofit business is like, it's just a tax, this is a tax term, right? And whether or not it's even self-sustainable or not to be able to allow for people in their livelihoods to be reliant on these nonprofits, unless you're throwing a $50 million endowment inside of this business that is going to have to take a lot of management to maintain inside of these such fragmented spaces, such as the jails, prisons, federal, state, juvenile, ICE detention, right? So I feel like, one of the better ways to be able to do it is you find people that look like me, find Black founders, Black women founders specifically, right? Find people who are doing incredible work inside this space that are working their behinds off to be able to not only, one, try to figure out ways how to do like what we're doing, we want to completely democratize communications, because we know that scalable tech can be the thing that allows us to be able to not price gouge inside the space. We've all seen it, right? But the difference between what we're doing is we know that we can also take the same tools that we're building and take them inside of other market spaces where we can allow for them to be able to also generate revenues for us. So we aren't completely reliant on the detriment of somebody in one of my neighborhoods to be able to continue to figure out ways to generate revenue. Are you being that thoughtful outside of your private equity company? Because if you're not, then I just don't know if you can get on TV or in front of the media and say that you're trying to be a contributor to side of this space. Because the way that you do it is you find folks that have typically been boxed out and ask them what the solutions are. Right? Like, because I don't need your help to get on TV and say that we should do how you think we should help, right? Find out the people who have literally been stripped of all opportunity from being able to try to figure out how to build their real solutions, and then you're making a real investment.
You've been written about in Forbes magazine, a lot of other publications. You've been on a lot of big networks have praised you and your work, CNN and a variety of other networks. You did a TEDx talk, which is spectacular and inspirational. If anyone wants to see it, it's on YouTube. I watched it a couple of times, actually. I thought it was that great. And especially when you
I did a TEDx and I did a TED.
That is correct. Sorry, I didn't mean to mix that one up, and you're keeping me honest. I appreciate that. And they were both really inspirational. I love the part where you talk about your mom. It's very moving. Says so much about her and you as well. The United States still incarcerates more of its citizens than any other percentage-wise than any other country in the planet on the planet. Why is that, in your opinion? If there's a simple top line way to say, why do you think that is, and what are the 2 or 3 top things that we as a nation have to do to change that? It can't be a title anyone's proud of. We put more of our own people in jail than any other country. So we're in this together. We better be, even if we all think we are or not. So what's the reason for it, and what are your top 2 or 3 bullet points that we have to do as a country to turn this around?
Yeah, I mean, the reasons for it is simple. It was centered around slavery. It's mimicked slavery, and it's what we've always done. It's what we've, as a country, known to do. We've done it very successfully well, and most people do what they've done successfully well over and over again. Now it just continues to look different. So that's the reason. That's the reason why how we gotten here. I think that this new era that we're living in now, where social justice conversations are becoming a highlight of the majority of our political conversations, and even inside of some of our cultural conversations, i.e., in the music and the arts and movies and TV. I think that these is our celebrities are like coming through, right? Like it's really been celebritized, where folks like Kim Kardashian or even John Legend, who helped get an investment for us, right? Like all of those, these people that are contributing to this conversation, I think will continue to shift the way that we move as a country toward figuring out ways to let this justice system look a little bit better. At least I'm optimistic about it. I'm one of the ones who want to abolish mass incarceration. And so when I think about the 2 or 3 things that we can figure out how to do that, the biggest thing I think that we can do is, again, continue to invest in folks who are building solutions that look like me. Now, in my space, an investment looks like an entrepreneur. Maybe it looks like an actual investment, or lending some of your access or social capital to some of your spaces, or becoming a client of ours in order for us to be able to connect you back to what a real a transformative system could potentially look like with your businesses, right? Some others, it may be figuring out how to invest inside of their podcasts or reading their books and educating yourself. Because I told you, like I said before, it's not my responsibility to educate you, because I have no idea how the heck you figured out how to enslave people who look like me for years and years and years and years. I don't know how you figured it out how to do it, right? So it's not my idea to figure out how to educate you on how to pull me out of this space. It's your idea. It's up to you to figure out how to educate yourself. And then I think that the other thing that I think that we need to continue to do is to listen to stories like mine, right? Like, look, I was a 15-year-old kid. I made a horrible decision. I had a mom who went to church every single day and tried to keep me in church. I was a great student. I played on a basketball team. I won oratorical contests. I mean, I had people inside of my courtroom at my sentencing that would line the courtroom walls, and they tried to literally beg the judge to let me go back to school like a normal student, right? And they was like, this, nah, right? But I think that even with that, the tenacity, the resilience, the grit, you ask, like, what is it different about us that others, like the people that graduated from HBS or UPenn, they haven't had their backs up against the wall the way I had to when I was literally a teenager. So the things that slammed doors in my faces, the no's, all the people who told me that I wasn't going to do it when I came home, even the people today who were like, it's a business dealing with people in prison. I don't even know how that works. I don't know nobody in prison. I can't contribute to it. Like, even those folks who tell us and doubt us even now, we're reshaping the way that stigma has been placed on our lives. As a result of that, I want to help change the dinner table conversations. And the way that we do that is we bring these kinds of conversations back to our dinner tables. We watch this podcast. We literally send this podcast to everybody that we know. We send this YouTube video to everyone we know. So just so that they can change their dinner table conversations. Because when we change the dinner table conversations, we change the policy decisions. We change the policy decisions. We change legislation. We change the bills that got people like me inside in front of these judges that had mandatory minimums that prevented me from ever having an actual opportunity at life. Now, thank God I was one of the folks who had someone in my life, like my mom, to help continue to keep me on the path when I wasn't strong enough to be able to do it for myself. But there's so many people that just aren't blessed to be able to have that. And we have a social responsibility as our community to be able to figure out ways to demonstrably change this. And I think that it begins with changing the dinner table conversations.
Well, the disparity in sentencing is almost impossible to argue over the years, and you know, it's a whole separate podcast. Actually, maybe we'll have you back to talk about that as well. Last thing before I go, I'd be have to ask. You've got your own family now. How many kids do you have?
I have two, 10, and my daughter. My son Marcus is 10, and my daughter Aya turns 5 next month.
And they're beautiful. I've seen some of your pictures on social media. What goes through your mind for your own kids? Do you ever have that fear of what if they ended up in the same boat I did, or are you just that much more passionate and driven to, you know, raise them, take that off the table, however it is that you do that? What goes through your mind looking at them? I mean, your son is only 5 years away in age. He's 10 from where you were when you were in an adult prison.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, it wasn't even an option for my children to ever end up in that kind of situation. Like, it was like, yeah, like daddy did it, so you will never have to do that, right? And we'll create pathways to ensure that could never ever happen to you. And then one day, my wife took my son. He was about 8 years old at the time, and she took him we were at my sister's house, and we were at a cookout. And they left from the cookout for a second to go to it was the CVS or Rite Aid or something, to go buy a pack of Uno cards so that we can all play Uno as a family while we were at the cookout at my sister's house. That was the closest store. So they said, all right, we're going to leave to go make a store run, and Marcus Jr. is going to come with me. Like, all right, go ahead, you guys go. Be back in about 5 minutes. No worries. Going to get Uno cards. And they come back, and my son is freaking hysterical. And I'm like, what's going on? What's happening? And my wife was like, we had a conversation in the car on the way back, but Marcus Jr., I want you to try as best you can to tell your father what you just experienced. What happened? So my son begins to tell me the story about when they walked inside of this Rite Aid, or it's the drugstore, whatever drugstore it was. I remember that drugstore. They walk inside this drugstore, and it was the security guard who was there was a police officer. It was one of the city's police officers. And when he walked in, he saw my wife and my son, and he had turned around and he grabbed onto his holster of his gun. And my wife and my son continued to go to the store. They shopped and did whatever they did, and they came back with the cards, and they were sending out a story. And my son was really shaken up because this came during the same time that the George Floyd incident had just happened. And all of the conversation inside of our family and his school, on TV, and anywhere where you had a listening ear was around this incident that happened with George Floyd. And my son making that correlation between George Floyd being Black, and it happened to be a police officer, and him being Black, and that being a police officer at the store, he was so hysterical because he thought that when that police officer grabbed his gun, that he was going to kill him. And when my son had to explain to me that he thought that a freaking 8-year-old thought that he could potentially get shot just because that he was a Black boy, what it did, it was raise the awareness of my life that no matter what neighborhoods I live in, no matter what schools my children go to, no matter what the lessons or conversations that we have, we still live in a country where that is a real fear for people that look like us. And so as a result of it, I won't say now that with the same level of confidence I had before that experience, that these things could never happen to my children. But I daggone sure will assure you that I will work so freaking hard to make sure that I'm injecting the love and the empathy in the world to make it a little bit safer for them so that they won't have to experience what I experienced, whether it was because of an action that they did and they needed forgiveness or grace because they needed a second chance, or simply because they woke up as a Black person. either way, I want to figure out a way to be able to contribute to a world that doesn't have a demise that you would typically see when you hear those kinds of stories.
No matter how you slice it, you are part of the solution, inspirational. If anyone has not had a chance to see your TEDx or TED Talks, go on YouTube. You're easy to find. Marcus Bullock, Google you. Your Instagram is public and out there. Check out Flikshop. I've been surfing it. I think it's really cool. Tons of applications as well as for prison facilities. I know it has a potential and is going to be used in assisted living facilities. So really continued success. I hope we can talk again on so many other topics that we touched on today, and really wish you absolutely the best. As not seen on TV, on our YouTube, subscribe, follow for more fun stories, exciting stories, interesting stories, aspirational stories like our friend Marcus here. And I wish you the continued best. Keep doing what you're doing, man. The world needs more people like you, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
All right. God bless you, brother.